Okay, guys, I'm going to take you on a little journey through the GI tract. So, first of all, everyone knows that when you eat, you got to chew your food, right? And one of the ways you taste food is with your tongue. So, your tongue helps you in taste. There's 6 tastes the tongue can detect. And you also, there's bad stuff that you can put in your mouth or your nose. So there's lymphatic tissue or tissue of the immune system that is involved in making sure that bad stuff doesn't get into your body and you get sick. So you got this group of lymphatic tissue right here called your adenoids or pharyngeal tonsils. And then not shown in this diagram, you have the palatine tonsils that guard your oral airway, and you also have the sublingual tonsils. So the esophagus is this hollow muscular tube. It's made of smooth muscle, and it rhythmically contracts to propel the food that you ate down and through the stomach. So a couple of other things. As you know, the trachea, part of the respiratory system, is anterior or in front of the esophagus. So when you chew and eat food, what you want to make sure is that food goes into your esophagus and not your trachea. So there's a flap of cartilage right here called the epiglottis. And the epiglottis closes over the trachea to prevent any food from getting sucked into the lungs. If it gets sucked into the lungs, it's called aspiration. So you don't want that. That is bad for you. You should write that down. So let's begin labeling some of this stuff. Maybe. So, got your tongue. Right? Then this area right here is the oropharynx. Then this here is the laryngopharynx. This part right here, epiglottis. And then this hollow muscular tube here is the esophagus. So when you chew food, again, the epiglottis closes over the trachea. The food travels from the oropharynx to the laryngopharynx and then into this hollow muscular tube called the esophagus. And how the esophagus moves the food from the back of your throat into the stomach is it will rhythmically contract in peristaltic waves, and it will push that bolus of food through the GI tract. So let's take a look now at some of the lower aspects of the GI tract. Now, not shown in this model is the diaphragm. So the diaphragm is a big, thick skeletal muscle that separates the entire thoracic cavity from the abdominal cavity. So, and there's a hole in the diaphragm, dear Liza, that the esophagus has to go through. And that hole in the diaphragm is called the esophageal hiatus. So if you've ever heard of a hiatal hernia, that's where this hole gets bigger and the top part of the stomach, the fundus, ruptures through the diaphragm and ends up in the thoracic cavity, and that can cause some problems. So let's look at the stomach here a little closer. Just like most organs in the body, they are divided into anatomical regions. So these are the ones that you're going to need to know. So we'll take a little bit of a closer look inside the stomach. Now, remember that each distinct section of the GI tract is separated by a circular band of muscle called a sphincter. So in this case, the esophagus is distinct from the stomach. So there is a circular band of muscle that separates the esophagus from the first part of the stomach, and that's called the lower esophageal sphincter muscle. Now, this is the kind of muscle that is actually weakened when people have a condition called GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease. Now, just very quickly, most people during the day are upright, right, depending on your profession. So most of the gastric contents is in the lower part of the stomach, right? But if you lay down, all those gastric contents come to the top part of the stomach. And one of the nutrients that's digested in the stomach is protein. So when people eat late at night, they smoke, drink, swear, don't read the textbook, and they go to bed, they're going to have a lot of hydrochloric acid in their stomach because you need that to help digest protein. Well, muscle is protein. So what the acid does is begins to erode that lower esophageal sphincter muscle, and the stomach contents go into the esophagus. And that can have some serious consequences. So the reason it's important to understand some of these anatomical parts is so that you understand with disease processes why this stuff occurs. All right, so you have this little area here. This little area here right after, at the beginning of the stomach, is called the cardia. Now, the stomach isn't divided into distinct parts. The top of any hollow muscular organ is called the fundus. So this is the fundus of the stomach. And then the largest part of the stomach, so this area in here, it's called the body of the stomach. Right? That makes up the bulk of the stomach. Then as you can see, the body of the stomach begins to narrow. And this area is called the pyloric canal. Now, the walls of the stomach are made of muscle, smooth muscle, and it can contract and relax, right? So at the end of the stomach, because the stomach is distinct, we're going to be entering the first part of the small intestines right here called the duodenum. So there has to be a circular band of muscle that separates the pyloric canal from the first part of the small intestines called the duodenum. And that circular band of muscle is called the pyloric sphincter. Now, in kids, sometimes they can develop thickening of the muscle in the pyloric canal and a very thick pyloric sphincter muscle that doesn't relax easy. So when the stomach begins to contract and try to push the stomach contents into the duodenum, well, if that muscle is really, really tight, it won't allow that acidic chyme that was in the stomach to enter the duodenum. So the result is reverse peristalsis, and that results in really, really severe projectile vomiting, where these kids vomit like a fire hose. And projectile vomiting is always pathologic. Little babies, up until a year or so, the lower esophageal sphincter muscle is relatively weak. So it's normal for them to burp up. It's not normal for your 18-year-old to burp up. But if your child has projectile vomiting, where it's spewing out of them, that's pathologic. Also, if their head turns completely around, then you need to seek help immediately. You should probably write that down. So let's look at a few more of the anatomical structures of the stomach. As you can see, it's kind of, the stomach's kind of J-pouched, hollow muscular organ. So you have this curve here, and this is called the lesser curvature. And then obviously here, this is the greater curvature. The greater. I'm spelling like I'm talking. Good thing I don't count spelling. We'd all be messed up. The greater curvature right here. All right, and then as you can see kind of these like little elevations and depressions in the stomach. These are called rugae. And what they do is they allow the stomach to expand kind of like an accordion. So depending on the size of your stomach, with food in it, it can expand to 3 or 4 times its emptied volume. And in some people who are overweight, their stomach is actually overstretched all the time. So they have to put a ton of food in there to feel full. So these are the divisions of the stomach. And then again, remember the circular band of muscle that separates the pyloric canal from the first part of the small intestines is called the pyloric sphincter. So let's get rid of this. And then we're going to move into the first part of the small intestines. Now, let's look at this. This part right here, where it connects to the stomach, this area right here, the first 1/3, 1/4 of the small intestines. This area right here is called the duodenum. So let me label that for you. So, whoops. So this area right here is called the duodenum. Right? And as you can see, you have this thing that looks like a long boxing glove. This guy right here is your pancreas. So this area right here is the pancreas. And the pancreas is actually divided into 3 parts. It's divided into the head of the pancreas, which is the largest part of the pancreas. Then you have the body of the pancreas. And then finally over here, you got the tail of the pancreas. Now, the pancreas releases hormones into the blood, epinephrine, insulin and glucagon. And it also releases digestive enzymes into the duodenum. So when you eat a meal and you got some food in here, right, the pancreatic cells will release digestive enzymes into this pancreatic duct. And the pancreatic duct takes those pancreatic enzymes and dumps them into the duodenum. And not shown in this model here, but I'll show you later, is the fact that, and this is very important to understand, you have the liver up here, and then underneath it is a hollow muscular organ called the gallbladder. And the function of the gallbladder is to store bile. So this is the gallbladder, and then there's a little duct connected to the gallbladder called the cystic duct. And what the gallbladder stores is bile. So there's bile in the gallbladder. And the function of bile is to help bust up fat so you can digest it easier, emulsify it. So the liver and the gallbladder and the pancreas all meet in the same spot. So there's a tube that connects the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas together. So the duct that connects the gallbladder with the ducts from the liver that drain the bile is called the common bile duct. And I'll show you in a different video, but I just want you to understand that. So the common bile duct and the pancreatic duct dump their contents into the duodenum. So anytime you have problems with your gallbladder, it can lead to pancreatic or liver problems. If you have pancreatic problems, it can lead to gallbladder and liver problems. If you have liver problems, it can cause pancreatic and gallbladder problems because they're all related. Now, let's look a little bit closer now. And then you have the three divisions of the small intestines. And the three divisions of the small intestines, the first part, number one, is the duodenum. The largest part of the small intestines is the jejunum. And then you have the terminal end of the small intestines called the ileum. So the ileum is right here. And a couple of things about the small intestines. The small intestines are where the vast majority of digestion and absorption, meaning bringing it into the blood, of nutrients occur. So the reason they're called the small intestines is they have a smaller diameter hole. That's essentially it. And the small intestines go through peristaltic waves 20 to 30 times a day. And what's very important for you to remember is in the small intestines, there's a huge lymphatic supply there too. So you're cleaning any potential bad stuff that you ate along with your food, so that by the time you get into the ileum, this stuff is pretty sterile. So it's cleaned and then broken down and then absorbed into the bloodstream. And remember, I told you, everything that you put into your mouth, everything you put into your pie hole, has to go through the liver first. So that's that first pass phenomenon. And everything that was digested and absorbed gets absorbed into the venous end and then goes to the liver through that hepatic portal vein. So remember that the small intestine's sterile, right? And the terminal end of the small intestines is the ileum. And there is a little valve called the ileocecal valve, and that separates the small intestines, the ileum, with the large intestines. And the large intestines, by definition, have a larger diameter than the small intestines. So remember that the contents of the small intestines are relatively sterile. So you want to separate clean from dirty. So now we're going to enter the large intestines. And a couple of things about the large intestines. First of all, they only go through peristaltic waves 2 to 3 times a day. If it was going 20 to 30 times a day, you'd never get anything done. I gotta go. So the little valve, the ileocecal valve, separates the small intestine's sterile environment from the large intestine's not sterile, dirty environment. Then you have this thing that looks like a little worm hanging off the first part of the large intestines. And the first part of the large intestines is called the cecum. And hanging off the cecum is the veriform appendix. So the appendix is what's referred to as a vestigial organ, meaning at one time it had a function, but it no longer has a purpose. And as you can see, there's the little appendix, little sphincter there, and sometimes stuff can get in there and it can cause inflammation, and it can cause an appendicitis, an inflammation of your pancreas. What they believe the appendix was a little hideout for the bacteria that colonize your colon. So you need these bacteria. They help you, you help them. So let's go through this first. So you got the appendix here, you got the cecum, and then you have the ascending colon, right? It's moving up, ascending. Then, not shown here, is you have another part of the colon called the transverse colon. And then finally you have, of course, the descending colon. And then you have the terminal portion of the descending colon that kind of resembles an S. So this is called the sigmoid colon. And in the large intestines, as you can see, you have these little outpouchings here. These little outpouchings are called haustra. Now, think of the small intestines as like a thick rubber hose, right? Tough, durable. And then think of the large intestines as one of those hoses that looks like it's got, it expands as you fill it up. And those aren't as tough. So sometimes these little outpouchings, these little haustra, the wall can weaken and it can pooch out, and you have what's called a diverticulum. And if that area gets infected, it becomes inflamed and you get diverticulitis, and you don't want that. So those are the divisions of the large intestines. So let's just recapitulate a couple of things. Now, look. Small intestines, thick muscle, right? Peristaltically waving 20 to 30 times a day. As you can see, you have these little bands of muscle. And then they send out little strips of muscle here. That's what causes that outpouching. And these muscles contract rhythmically to move what is soon to be poop through the various portions of the large intestines. So really the function of the large intestines do not have digestive enzymes, but digestion occurs because you have in your large intestines what is called normal flora or normal biota. And normal flora are friendly bacteria. And these friendly bacteria provide stuff for you. They can help assist with the formation of vitamin K, riboflavin, right? Some B vitamins. They will actually make those for you. And then these bacteria, you give them a home, right, to live in. So they colonize your colon and they help you and you help them. So it's a kind of a synergistic relationship. So there's a bunch of bacteria, and depending on who you are, you can have over 700 different species of bacteria in your large intestines. And what they do is they digest the food that was undigested in the small intestines. And again, they help you. So the primary function of the large intestines is to house this bacteria that will digest undigested food from the small intestines. They also assist with providing you with some nutrients, some B vitamins, things along those lines. Now, as you move through the large intestines, more and more water gets absorbed into the blood. So water is getting reabsorbed that you drank and from your food, getting reabsorbed back into the blood. So as you traverse the large intestines, what's soon to be poop is becoming more and more formed. Also, you absorb electrolytes in the large intestines. This is why diarrhea is bad for you, because you're losing those electrolytes and you need that for nerve function, heart function. So once you have absorbed the water and electrolytes, and the normal flora has done its thing with respect to helping you out and digesting your undigested food, that whatever's left over will end up in the rectum. So let me show you. And the rectum is kind of like a little storage area for poop, because you can't go anytime you want, right? Well, maybe you can, I don't know. So anyways, you got poop in there. And then you actually have two sphincters. You have an internal and external sphincter. The external sphincter is under autonomic control, meaning you can control it. The internal sphincter is, wait, I think I got that backward. The internal sphincter is under autonomic control, meaning when the pressure builds up because poop is filling the rectum, it's like, okay, I gotta go. The external sphincter is under conscious control. So basically what you do is you tighten it up until it's appropriate to go. Then what you do is you evacuate your bowels, feel good about yourself, and then when you're done, maybe you actually think about reading the textbook. I don't know. Okay, so that's your little journey on the digestion model.